So you're back on, Eimear, talking about sports people up to no good. It must be your...
You're going to give me a bad rep now.
Well,
because I'm actually a big supporter of the GAA and other sports.
You are generally a GAA apologist in life.
Yeah, but I suppose
it gives me no pleasure to have you bring you on to have a go at the GAA. I promise it brings me no pleasure after all your...
Oh, I don't believe you.
Okay. Well, whether you believe me or not. So... I mean, obviously the case we're talking about, the people involved, the people convicted aren't necessarily major sports figures. However, they are significant local GAA players.
Mm.
This is the case of the two brothers, Daragh and Cian Hayes, who were jailed for a really, really savage assault on a former pal.
Mm.
And one of the reasons it's back in the news again is because of some of the character references these people have been given by very, well-known people in the local area.
Mm.
Just bring us back to the actual story and what these two men have been convicted of.
Yeah, so the story's been going around for a few weeks for different reasons, but the origins of it is that in January, Cian and Daragh Hayes were jailed for assault causing harm on Kieran Ryan. So Kieran Ryan was actually due to be Cian Hayes' best man. This all happened in 2021. So he was essentially lured to Daragh Hayes' house on the prefix of talking about Cian's upcoming wedding. And when they got there, they sat him down and they basically said, we want to talk to you about this. And what they were alleging was that Kieran Ryan had some kind of liaison with Daragh Hayes' ex-partner, which in court, this woman actually gave in a statement to say that was not true. I think there had been some kind of innocent communication when Kieran Ryan
or something.
Yeah, the Kieran Ryan and this woman were in Doolin Clare for different reasons, and he saw that she was there. They were obviously in the same friend group and contacted her. It was completely innocent. So they were trying to allege that he had some kind of liaison with her and just launched this horrific attack, like with a hurl and a wrench.
Yeah.
And it was so bad that at one point he was lying in a pool of blood and they straightened out his leg and used the wrench to hit him under the knee and break his leg. He suffered like horrific injuries. I think it was like a punctured lung, shattered ribs, broken leg, broken fingers. He required extensive surgery and he gave an interview to Patrick O'Connell in the Sunday World after the jailing and told how doctors told his mother that they weren't sure if he would survive. There was actually a 50% chance of survival according to Kieran Ryan.
Which was an incredible, I mean, I think I remember the case when it first came to court. And obviously at that time it was the two brothers of Kyle Hayes have been charged with assault. Kyle Hayes being one of Ireland's best known hurlers, I suppose, but best known for a couple of reasons, not just his talent and the fact wasn't he nominated as a
for a GAA All-Star, for the 5th time, but this was after he was up in court himself, so he was
up at court and ultimately received a conviction. Some of the more serious charges, he was found not guilty of them.
Yeah.
So that initially, the case was just really got into the public mind because of they were the brothers of a successful hurler. But when you actually hear the level of violence involved in this attack, I mean, it's way more shocking than them just being the brothers of somebody.
It is, and it's because it's one of those things, and it's been referenced several times in the Kyle Hayes case by the judge, by his manager, that, this is only in the media because he's a star, a GAA star, and media are just using it for headlines. But I think this case would have stood out on its own if you just look at what they did. Like they lured him, and it was a premeditated attack, and they were actually originally charged with assault causing serious harm, which it can actually result in a life sentence. Now they pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of assault causing harm, but that was the level that they were at, and they're probably lucky that nothing more that Kieran Ryan has come through and has made pretty much, I'm sure he still has the scars, but pretty much a full recovery. So the incident was completely shocking, and I suppose other elements that have kind of made it stand out as well is just the reaction in they're from the parish of Kildimo and Limerick, but Kieran Ryan, they all played for the really well-known GA club in Limerick, Kildimo Palace Kennery, and Kyle Hayes is obviously the standout star there, but his brothers would have played, Kieran Ryan would have played. Kieran Ryan was actually played for minor Limerick footballers, so he was a kind of a lesser-known sports star in his own right as well, but the extent of the fallout of this attack, because it was obviously nearly 4 years ago now, was that in the area, Kieran Ryan said that his family basically became pariahs. And, you know, people that were working for him, one guy was taken up in a pub and said, choose one side, choose the Hayeses or choose the Ryans. And, you know, he told how his dad, who was a Eucharistic minister in the local parish, couldn't go to mass.
Yeah.
He was offered a bag of cash basically by somebody and told, you know, this will go away if you take this bag of cash. So, you know, that's elements of the story are really shocking as well, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, he said in the interview with Pat in the Sunday World, people were just in silence because they were afraid. The fear people have of the GA and the Hayes, the Hayeses, they wanted nothing to do with us. My father wouldn't go to mass in Kildimo anymore, for example, because of how people were looking at him. And then he got a call from a local farmer asking if there was any way we can resolve this out of court. It's not good for the parish. That's what he said. It's not good for the parish. So it was just madness. They were blaming me for putting a downness on the parish and the GAA. So that's, you know, that is his recollection of it. Now, going along with that recollection, I suppose, is the fact that in the aftermath of this case and during the case, obviously the guilty verdict is reached, and then you get the sentencing hearing. The two Hayes brothers ultimately got a custodial sentence, both of them. But as they're being sentenced, you hear that they've been given references from well-known people in the local area.
So they were given character references, which they were handed into the court. So there were letters, basically. So one was from a former school principal. He obviously would have been, I assume, principal when the brothers were in school. And there was also a reference from the GA club that we just spoken about. Patrick O'Connell called to both the principal and to the chairperson of the GA club in the aftermath of the story, obviously the original interview with Kieran Ryan, and you know, asked them about giving references to people that have been convicted of such horrific attacks, because we know that these references, they can have a bearing on the sentencing. Obviously, they're taken as part of the mitigation, so they're used as a, you know, the judge can consider them when he's determining how much of a sentence, you know, he's going to give. Is he going to suspend a larger portion of it, etc.? And also, you're not legally obliged to give it also. So in that context, we asked them. The principal was John Egan. He's a former principal at a school in Askeaton in Limerick, and he basically gave us quotes and said that, you know, he gave the testimonial purely on educational basis. So basically he would have been speaking about what they were like at school. Yeah, exactly, them at school. And he said that, you know, if he had have known the extent of the case, he may have considered it. So he basically said that that's all I have to say. He said it would have given it some consideration if I had known, you know, the extent of the crime, and that it was purely in an educational context. We also called to the home of the chairperson of the GA club, and he said he didn't want to speak about it. He said the club will give us a statement. Pat hadn't, by the time of going to print, we hadn't actually got that statement, but he basically said we didn't want to speak. But I suppose in terms of the references, like Kieran Ryan didn't really want to go into that. She said, I just want to forget it now, because we did speak to him in the wake of the reference issue. And he did say that he got a letter from the GA club about his involvement and how much he's given to the club. And he said that was nice. But I guess, you know, in the sense of, you can ask the question, should people who have been, you know...
Well, what is the purpose of a reference other than to give a reference in court, you know, for sentencing? It's other than to get lesser of a sentence, I suppose. I mean, that is the purpose of it.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, the people who give them can say, well, they've no authority about anything to do with sentencing, which is 100% true. They don't get to suggest, like, give him 5 years or give him 7.
Yeah.
But obviously, the the purpose
They choose
of
to
it.
do it. They don't have to do it.
They don't have to do it. And the only value in it is that it would mitigate some of the sentencing.
Yeah.
Now, people are entitled to give it, and people are entitled to ask people to give it on their behalf. But the idea that it just goes into the ether and nobody knows what happens with it, of course, it's of benefit to the accused.
Yeah.
And it's long been a thing of great controversy in the Irish courts. I mean, we've had, even this year, we've had people being held to account for giving those sort of character references.
Yeah, of course. And I suppose a thing as well, if you look at the sentences that the brothers got, so Cian Hayes got jailed for 2 years and Daragh Hayes got jailed for 2.5 years. And they would have had some of that suspended on the provision that they are of good behaviour when they're released. But you could I know Kieran Ryan wasn't happy with the sentences, and you could sort of say 2 years for a horrific attack which left a man with a 50-50 chance of survival. Is that a lenient sentence? That assault that they pleaded guilty to, Section 3 assault, can result in a sentence of up to 5 years. So, it doesn't have the biggest jail sentence in terms of length, but, they still only got less than half the Cian Hayes did. And, Kieran Ryan, when he was speaking to us, made the example of when he was in court for the hearing, a woman got 2 years for shoplifting. Now, we don't know the background of that, but he was making the point that is that what you would get? So did the character references have a sway on the judge in terms of what the sentences that they got, which are considered? Yeah. I personally think, I'm not a legal expert, it's my own opinion, but it does seem low to me just when you read the details of what they did to him. It was so premeditated and it was horrific. So as you said, the only reason for character references are to try and get the accused a lower sentence.
Yeah, and look, a judge will take many things into account, and often they put a great weight on previous convictions. So, I mean, but it can't but jar when you see somebody obviously done for shoplifting, and we see it all the time, get 6 months a year.
Yeah.
But I mean, certainly, the judges certainly will take into account the fact that somebody is of standing in the local community, whether they should or not. I mean, even just this year we had a councillor, a county councillor up the north?
Yeah, he was a local councillor for the SCLP. Yeah, he
was forced to resign after giving a character reference to somebody accused of a sex crime.
Yeah, so there was a soldier. So the soldier is from Derry, so that's why he's the councillor who for the SCLP in that area gave him a character reference.
I mean, he was convicted in down here.
This is what I was going to say. So the soldiers from Derry, that's why the reference was given up there. But he was convicted of the offence down here. He basically was convicted of raping a female colleague in the Defence Forces.
Yeah.
And this reference was given by the councillor. And this is only a couple of weeks ago, and there was massive consternation over it. And the councillor has since come out and said that he basically said he didn't realise what he was being convicted for, and that he now retracts it, and that he regrets it basically. Yeah. He wishes he hadn't given the reference. And the party also spoke about how they didn't agree with it, and they weren't happy about it either.
This is the victim in the case. Yeah.
The SDLP.
Oh, sorry.
The party saying that they didn't believe that he should have been given a reference either.
I remember covering a case, this is back in 2022, we had on the website, and it was actually Mr. Justice David Keane. Now, this is it was a case involving a sex offender. The sex offender wasn't named to protect the victim, but he was sitting in the Central Criminal Court, and he said at the time he made a stand saying he would only accept character references if the people who had written them were present in court to take the stand to allow for cross-examination. So judges have sometimes, signalled disquiet with this, as well as victims groups, and politicians have attempted to address it. Helen McEntee brought forward some sort of a bill addressing the issue as well. Yeah,
and I suppose speaking of people giving character evidence in court, we actually must reference Kyle Hayes. So when he was up himself, so Kyle Hayes at the end of 2023 was convicted of violent disorder inside and outside a nightclub. He was cleared by a jury of assault, but he was being sentenced for the violent disorder offence. And John Kiley, so obviously Kyle Hayes is a 5-time All-Ireland winner with Limerick, has won numerous All-Stars, and Kyle, his manager is John Kiley, Limerick hurling manager, obviously, and he gave evidence in court and actually spoke to, how he'd been in contact pretty much every day since 2017 with Kyle Hayes, because, the offence had been 5 years previous. He was a big part of the Limerick team. He spoke about how, he was a young man. He was in no way condoning his actions, but he was saying that, he gives to charity, and, he has suffered in the media, and he felt like that he should be allowed to go, get on with his life, and asked the judge not to jail Kyle Hayes, which he ultimately wasn't jailed. Ironically then, Kyle Hayes was later in trouble. He was charged with dangerous driving, and now faces a potential of having the conviction. So he was given a suspended sentence for a violent disorder, which means that you will avoid jail if you stay out of trouble for that period of time. But because he was then later convicted of dangerous driving, he possibly could be jailed in March if the judge decides to reactivate that suspended sentence. But at the time, John Kiley obviously was appealing to the judge on behalf of Kyle Hayes and basically asking him not to jail him. And he did that in court. And he was asked, I think, about what, about the offence. And he said, of course, I'm not condoning it, but, he deserves a second chance.
You can understand how people get in this position where they maybe, they feel they have a loyalty to somebody, have an involvement with them, and they feel they're giving a character reference. They're not, either condoning or accepting a criminal act.
Yeah.
And, so you can understand how they may get in a position where they give that, but it is a controversial issue. And of course, I do think that legislation has now been enacted that the changes are that character references for sex offenders in particular, they must now be vouched. So before, there was a couple of issues over a many year period where a reference would be produced and there was doubt that the person, the validity basically of that. And also they can be in theory cross-examined in court if in that case, I mean, that was brought in by Helen McEntee, that bill, and has been enacted.
Yeah.
So Kyle Hayes is still is expected to come before the court on that about that, the potential of that suspended sentence being activated. But his two brothers are now
in jail.
They're in jail, and what the sentence, were they in jail before? Do we know?
I don't think they were in jail before, no. So they're in jail now, obviously, and yes, they're in jail now, obviously. But Cian Hayes was a member of the Kildimo Palace Junior B team who won the Munster All-Ireland. Sorry, they won the Munster Championship, Club Championship, but obviously he's in jail now. Yeah. So it remains to be seen, in terms of when they come back out, what will happen there. But yeah, no, they're serving their prison sentences at the moment. Kyle Hayes is obviously not in jail because he got a suspended sentence, but he is appealing. So he got convicted of dangerous driving and he is appealing that sentence, so they can't actually rule on whether they're going to reactivate a suspended sentence for the violent disorder conviction until they deal with the appeal for the dangerous driving conviction. So, that was in itself was also quite shocking. He overtook 9 cars on a motorway in Cork and was driving at speeds of over 150 kilometres, I think. So, we'll see what happens with the appeal. But yeah, no, his brothers are, they're convicted criminals now and they're serving a prison sentence. But if you look at what they did, it's really horrific. And, Kieran Ryan had said that, Daragh Hayes accepted that they went over the top and he cried apparently, but Cian Hayes, he said, didn't show any remorse.
No. And again, a picture tells 1,000 stories, and we'll have the picture of the victim in his hospital bed and the injuries he suffered are, you can see it, the visible effect of them with your own eyes. Yeah,
the psychological scars. And it's actually funny because when Pat, he doorsteps the people that had given references to the Hayes brothers, and when he asked Kieran Ryan if he wanted to comment, Kieran Ryan said, I want to move on in my life. But he also made point that, it's people are getting excited. That's the words he used about it now. But he said, I've been living with this for 3.5 years. I've been having nightmares for this amount of time. So, it's not something that he's probably lucky in terms of the injuries seem to be healing, but like the psychological trauma of it, you can only imagine. And because he's still living close to the area and is working there and has a business there, and you know, it's not. And he said that as well. He said anybody can just walk in, like Patrick just walked into his business and spoke to him. He said anybody could do that, and like I have to live with this now. So yeah, it is a horrific crime. I know we sort of talk about sports stars behaving badly, and we mentioned we've mentioned like McGregor and Kyle Hayes, but this crime is it would be a standout sort of act no matter what. Okay, well, thanks, Eimear. Next time we get a sports star behaving badly, I'll talk to Nicola about it and leave you on the sidelines. Please don't. Use a sports metaphor. Thanks, Niall. Thanks. Robbie Lawler was out of control.
This is Double Cross, the murder of Robbie Lawler.
It was going to be an all-out war with him in the middle of it.
A Crime World special investigation podcast based on my new book, Web of Betrayal, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.